everything pretty much culturally interesting in the United States of America is created by Black people. I mean, our indigenous American music, which is jazz, you know, is created by Black people, even to the point of cultural things that survive to this day, like the word cool comes used in the way that it's used, you know, in slang, comes from jazz and from Black people. So the story of American music is the story of Black music. The story of American culture is the story of Black culture. And Black people are the engine of culture in the New World, you know, and since the inception of the United States. And DC is no different.
Black music has always spoken to the condition of Black people, whether that be in the blues articulating not only sadness and trouble, but also love and life in all of its colors, whether it be jazz, whether it be hip hop. Music has continued to be an articulation of Black life over time.
The earned culture is, you know, what comes out of the alt-Black experience. You know, Afro-punk is another one of those things where, you know, without Bad Brains, again, a Black punk rock band from PG County that everybody knows. Everybody knows that logo, the U.S. Capitol with the lightning bolt hitting it. You go to Thailand, you see that logo. You know, every T-shirt shop on the planet, every poster shop on the planet has a Bad Brains photo.
You know, before Shakespeare said, he who has no music or she has no music has no soul. And music can be such a important thing in this city. But what has happened is that cities must do more to help preserve this music, help preserve the institutions. It has not done a very good job in this. It's important that this is not just Black people's music, it's the music of America. There's no music that I know of born of these shores that has played such a role throughout the world, and so important. And it's not just in itself jazz, any kind of music. You know, people get the idea that because jazz musicians are great, that they're innovative, that they don't understand music. Well, Duke Ellington wrote 2,000 tunes, Ornette Coleman, John Coltrane wrote these beautiful, very difficult transcriptions to read. They are studied people, studied men. Just like LeBron James, a great basketball player, people think he's just big, but he studies the game. He knows how to carom, like Willie Hop is shooting the ball. They study these things, and African Americans have used it, and they all use them to better the human condition.
As a DJ, you know, we're music obsessives, and we study and we curate and we collect. And there are so many great records that have come out of DC that they're not household names, but they're formative in so many different scenes, in like soul and funk and R&B scenes around the world, where, you know, you might not even heard of this artist. They might have only had a run of a few hundred copies, but you go around the world in places where this music is studied, and places where scenes have built around it, dance scenes, party scenes, collectors, and you'll find a lot of DC music in these spaces. So yeah, as a DJ, it's a rabbit hole that you can go down of just, yeah, especially like a lot of the independent R&B bands of the 60s, who, you know, where you had, otherwise you had like Motown and Stax, but every city had their local, you know, their local bands. And, you know, a lot of those records went under the radar, but they ended up as seeds in other places for people who are obsessed with Black American music. So it's cool to be in, you know, I haven't been to Japan, but people have told me stories of digging in Japan and people, you know, like coveting these rare DC records.
Us and like the younger baby boomers were probably like the last analog generation of people who got to discovering music organically, meaning there was no algorithm to market to you. We were not a target demographic. They didn't really figure out, you know, because so much of Gen X was DIY and counterculture, and it was so centered around, you know, these forms of expression that came out of Black, Latino, queer communities. So it was very much underground, and that was the whole thing. There was the mainstream, which was nonsense to us. We were like, ugh. And then there was underground. And let's be honest, even the mainstream stuff that we kind of were like, was good from a quality standpoint. I mean, you had amazing artists doing amazing work. It just was marketed to kind of a down the middle American audience. You know, Debbie Gibson can sing her ass off, you know, and was a good songwriter, is a good songwriter, but you know, it's not marketed, it's not coded for somebody who's, like I said, living around the way. So the evolution of music was, you know, hip hop was going up, and you know, the one thing nobody talks about now is, like, you know, the New York hip hop. They were, because it was a vacuum, they were vacuuming, you know, because New York was such a nexus for like jazz, and you had so many people from the West Indies and Africa, it became this Creole music, this gumbo music, and it was just vacuuming up all the influences they could get its hands on. Electro, which came out of the Puerto Rican community, you know, the freestyle, hip hop was just vacuuming up funk, anything.
I just love how each region has its own kind of flavor. But then, you know, it's just like black folks, you know, you don't realize, especially now with the internet, you realize like, oh, they did the same thing. They said the same words. You don't realize that there's this commonality with different, you know, people from different regions. So when it comes to DC, I think there's a special story to be told there. It is, you know, you have your people who were born and raised here, but then you have people who've come from other areas to add flavor to this city and to this culture. You know, I wasn't born and raised in DC. I was in Southern Virginia, but I got a little taste of DC.
There's a language just of, I mean, of course, African American vernacular is, you know, defines place for us as black people. So the way we talk in DC versus how they talk in the boroughs of New York versus how they talk in Chicago. And so there are people that come to DC that are transient and have never heard a DC accent. And so go-go was like oftentimes crystallized the way we spoke to each other. You know, when I was a kid, you know, things were bumping fresh. Chuck had a song called Be Bumpin' Fresh. You know, when the band was rocking, you know, I tell people like a go-go band is cranking. Cranking is to go-go what swinging is to jazz. You know, but not just the language vocabulary, but you know, just the vocabulary of rhythm and how you approach music, whether it be the swing, whether it be the call and response, whether it be the showmanship. Because when I was coming up in the 80s, you didn't just have go-go bands, you had such and such band and show. So that means you had a horn section, that means you had choreography. But of course they were in a lineage that were borrowing from or building upon, you know, the bands that influenced them, you know, the funk bands, you know, the Barcades, you know, the P-Funk, the Commodores, you know, so the go-go bands were reimagining certain funk traditions that existed and creating a new, you know, musical vocabulary around them, which is what we always do, which is how we evolve all of our forms as a people. Oh, the music that comes out of DC, how does it make me feel? I would say it gets me sized, which is, you know, a very DC term to describe being just excited and you know, high vibration. I get psyched because if I'm not home and I'm anywhere else, I'm like, well, this is great. What y'all are doing is great and I love it. But DC has the best everything. I can look at my contacts on my phone and be like, oh, you need a horn section, you need a drummer, you know, vocalists. So I'm always psyched to be from DC. When I'm at home or away, you know, maybe I might get a little annoying with it, but you know, I always rep my city super heavy. The migration to go-go behind Chuck inventing it, it invented a whole vocabulary, and what I describe growing up with go-go is something that's in your bones. Like the pocket is, my soul vibrates to the pocket. Like that's really something that gets in your DNA if you grew up with it. And so the sons of Chuck Brown were the heroes of my childhood. So that was Trouble, that was Essence, that was Lil Benny, Junk. And so the children that Chuck begat were the giant figures of growing up as a kid here. Those are the people that, like, you know, they're the superstars. I want to be like them. They're, you know, they define what it is to be in these neighborhoods that I grew up in, and the way that I related to my peers, and the communities that I lived in, and what we valued. You know, I was too young to be in the go-go's, but somebody had a PA tape, and you would just sit on the stoop and, oh, you got that Essence, you got that, you know, Wilmer's, oh, you got that Wilmer's joint, like, and then, but, you know, you would have like block parties, because that was part of the culture that I grew up in. So at the block parties, that's when I could actually see my heroes, you know, because block parties were all ages, and that was a phenomenon. I mean, that's a phenomenon of Black people everywhere, but where all generations and all ages are, you know, being festive together.
Go-go is a unique art form. It's a unique musical style. It's a fascinating story because there are multiple points where go-go could have gone more mainstream, but for a variety of reasons stayed closer to home. Whether that's with Chuck Brown busted loose in the 70s, or more contemporary, or debut, kind of getting us closer to the mainstream. It is essentially a live form of music, and live bands playing, and there can be challenges to live formats going big. And so we see with go-go, it staying closer to home, but also marking where DC is and what DC is as the chocolate city of old. So as DC has become more gentrified, spots for go-go have been pushed further and further out. The art has been pushed further and further out. Stigma around potential violence in places where go-go music is played has plagued the genre, despite the fact that violence can happen in all kinds of musical spaces. And so go-go becomes this way of declaring a regional identity, and we hold tight to that identity.
So DC music, I guess, okay, I'll start in the 70s and I worked my way forward until the prime of my youth, which was the 90s. 70s was, like I said, DC is a funk town, soul, R&B, and we had started having the large influx of people from the African diaspora in the Caribbean. So we had the funk side, which was Budweiser Superfest, and all the Globe poster events that were promoted by Dimensions Unlimited, and I was still relatively young. So I could go to like the Budweiser Superfest because those were more family things, but like when Rick James came to town, you couldn't go because I remember the local, you know, back then they said reefer, the guy who sold reefer, he knew when certain bands came to town, he had to increase his inventory because people knew they were going to a party that weekend. And so, but you know, as a little child, you kind of hear all these things and you see people going to and fro and you're like excited because, you know, there's an energy in the air. And I remember what a big deal, like I said, the Blackbirds being a Howard band and like Rockley Park, that song being a huge hit on the radio. And then it was nothing more surreal or like people say in the 2020s now, meta, about than being in Rockley Park at the little park where you can kind of drive through Rock Creek and people would kind of hang out there and hearing that song coming off of the radio. Because people, you know, this is pre-boombox. People would have to blast the music out of their cars. And hearing multiple cars playing that song in Rock Creek Park while people danced to it. And I was like a young kid, and I remember the guy my mom was dating at the time, you know, that's what we would do on Sundays. Let's go down to Rock Creek Park, and you would just see black people in the groves, in the little park areas. And you might not know them, But you could pull up and say, hey, how you doing? It might be somebody who knew somebody you knew, or a lot of the guys who had been to Vietnam were around. So it was always somebody who knew somebody who knew somebody. Or where you from? Oh yeah, you know, Little Earl over. And so just kind of that community. Herbie Azor, who was a producer for Salt and Pepper, he got it, somehow he heard go-go. And I think it's because, and this is kind of dark, but because there was this pipeline of the hustlers from New York would come to DC and try to set up shop and sell crack. During the crack era, they were setting up shop in DC. A lot of your favorite rappers, that was their thing. You guys out of New York would come down here and set up shop. And so they got exposed to go-go. So there was this kind of conversation through the underground drug economy and jail economy between New York and DC and Philly. You can't forget about Philly. And so all these different influences started making its way into New York hip hop. And so you go back and listen to songs like My Mic Sounds Nice, it's because New York dudes were coming down to DC, and that's a go-go song. And they were just straight taking, they're like, yo, this beat is crazy. I'm gonna use this.
This program was produced by WHUT and made possible by contributions from viewers like you. For more information on this program or any other program, please visit our website at WHUT.org. Thank you.